Okay. Oh, well, hi, Jodie.
Hi.
This is our latest pod here. We're going to be talking obviously about change, as that's the sort of theme to our topics. But I think we're going to maybe throw light on it from a slightly different perspective and point out that change isn't just about big initiatives, but it's actually about day-to-day growth, development, and goal setting. So I think it change can be a small or a big thing. So I think that's the thing we're going to sort of try and focus on today. And also because of that, recognize that sometimes it can feel to some of us like there's just nothing but change. We've probably all heard the old expression, the only constant is change. It's a well-worn phrase. But the challenge in that is if change is going on all the time in our lives, we can become worn down by the fact that our organizations and companies ask us to do yet another thing or another thing. So I think that's kind of where we're going to try and come from today, if I'm right.
Yeah, and I think then we've got that, that common term of change fatigue. I'm hearing that more and more. I was approached recently by another organization, big construction company, that whole change fatigue. So I think that would be interesting to explore what do we mean by that and practically what do we do with that?
Cool. I think that's a great start. So if I was to challenge you initially, then when people say change fatigue, and I have heard that expression, what does it mean to you, or what does it mean to the people saying it to you?
Yeah, so essentially, we understand the kind of idea of change. The notion is that we're moving from A to B, whatever that is, and the fatigue component is we're weary, so it's happening too frequently. We are losing energy, we're losing our motivation, not again. So, from an organizational standpoint, and we think about that in terms of behavior change for me, there's such a strong link that's useful for us to explore is how do we support the people side of the business to adapt
Mm.
to change behaviorally? And I think we've got that whole blend between the mindset piece and the external operating environment that we're working in. So
Yeah.
that's a real challenge for managers.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing about that is when organizations see change not being embraced and the behaviors not being demonstrated on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, the natural response is to fall back into telling people, reminding them what the change is and telling them what they need to do. So we focus more on this is what we need to do, this is how we want you to do it. And we miss out that whole important thing about, well, why are people not engaged? And then why they're not engaged is usually to do with what's going on between their ears and that whole mindset piece and how that relates to the achievement of any goal, whether it's your individual goals, whether it's your team goals, organizational goals, change initiatives, growth, development, it doesn't matter. Like you say, anytime you're trying to go from A to B, that's change. And understanding the psychology that sits behind driving that, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think it highlights for me this emerging term around readiness gap, behavioral readiness gap. And what do we mean by that? It's like if we want people to change their behavior and to adopt this new approach, this new way of working, then we really need to think, like you say, around what are those psychological drivers and barriers to change, because
Mm.
they're the things that are not visible. We can't see what's going on inside somebody's mindset, but we know that our mindset, what's going on in our head, is driving the behavior. So for me, that is that human readiness, that behavioral gap that we need to pay attention to, because that's the bit that's going to highlight for us as leaders of businesses, as managers, as teams, where to focus our energy. Because if,
Mhm.
if our team is fatigued, we need to do something.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing because when you see that resistance to change, when you see people who can articulate to you what they need to do, they can even articulate why they're being asked to do it, so they can maybe empathize with an extent to why their organization is asking them to make the changes. They still don't do it. That resistance is often seen as stubbornness or low motivation, when in fact it's not at all, is it?
No, and I think that's where we need to be careful. I think it's a signal. whenever we start to hear certain comments, certain behaviors, it starts to signal that something's going on. People are not doing that new thing. They're not working in a new set of behaviors. AI, we touched on that last week, didn't we?
Mm.
AI adoption, technology changing at a fast pace. We can see that some people in a team will embrace that quite quickly, and others are not doing that. And then you can just get that general malaise, that general weariness across a team where you can see the energy slowing down, everything's slowing down. But I think for me, it's around paying attention to the signals, and then how do we start to unravel what's that signal suggesting? Because I think the danger is that you might see somebody's not engaging in something as resistance, where actually it could mean a number of things, couldn't it? The one thing that comes to mind for me is that it would very quickly signal maybe a lack of clarity, a lack of direction. Uncertainty is another strong word that comes to mind when we think about change and change fatigue.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I mean, one of the things we'll often talk about when we're running programs is that the biggest killer of performance is ambiguity, not being clear, not having that real strong clarity of what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think that can be part of the pitfalls of some initiatives around driving changing behavior. People aren't really 100% sure exactly what it is they're trying to achieve, whether it be on a personal note or from an organizational team perspective. So I think there's an element of that. And I guess what we've talked about for the last few minutes at least is this idea that okay, change fatigue, this it's just never ending. It's almost like body blow for some people that I speak to. That never ending cycle of change, 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 do things different, try this, do this, leads to a kind of perceived resistance, at least in from the perspective of being a manager of people who aren't engaging in the required behaviours, when in fact it might not be a motivational or wouldn't be a motivational piece. It could just be other factors. So we can recognise that tends to manifest itself in people appearing disengaged, even when they're not. They're actually more just worn out and tired from the whole change cycle. So if that's sort of what we're discussing and why it's kind of important for an organization, what do you think are some of the things people can embrace and do, some of the actions around how we would deal with that from an organizational or team perspective? What are some of the things that would help address that perceived disengagement?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question. For me, it starts with data. We we can't really do anything unless we get under the surface, and we can't do that unless we have some kind of metrical data. We can talk to people. We can start to think about how do we make things that are not tangible, not visible? How do we start to think organizationally about measuring that, surfacing that? I mean, that's where obviously Engage is a bit of a game changer. It is a way that we can start to measure where is somebody's mindset psychologically, where are they? Are they feeling confident about change? Are they open to a new way of working? And where is that driver motivation? That's what Engage is going to give us. So for me, it is about surfacing, making visible things that are not tangible, not conscious. And at an organizational level, we can then start to see patterns. And you'll see differences in teams. You'll have those that will be on board, seemingly super engaged. We don't want them to risk burnout. We've
Mhm.
got others that seemingly everything's slowing down. They're not really engaging, so they're not embracing. So, as a manager, we need to give them tools, ways that they can start to really support people in different ways. Our response, our individual response to change is always going to be different.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting thing. And it sort of goes back to something which I've been reflecting on recently, which is the great expression, you don't know what you don't know. And I think many people, when they've got to achieve anything, as I said, if it's personal development, if it's personal goals, if it's organizational goals, if it's team objectives, if it's embracing a change transformation, it doesn't really matter. Whenever you're being asked to engage in a change of any description, we often don't know why we're not more enthusiastic in our engagement. You see lots of people set personal objectives about their health, going to the gym, eating more, socializing more, building stronger social networks. Yeah, yeah, I know I need to do it, but I don't. And you think, you know what to do, you know what the benefits are, but you still don't make those changes in your life to make those things happen. And it's because people, generally speaking, are fairly oblivious to the psychological processes that help or hinder their ability to embrace change. And I think that's the thing that's really fascinating for me with the Engage process, which is it makes you aware of what you weren't aware of, when actually it's all about you anyway. It's nothing to do with what's going on around you. It's your response to that. And so it's really interesting to get that data that you talk about and actually be able to see what it is you need to do in order to more fully embrace something you can see the benefits of, and you fully understand what it involves. And I think that's the thing that interests me most. This, I don't know, awareness piece.
Yeah, and I think that is it all starts there, doesn't it, Simon?
Mm,
It's a great point to raise. It's self-awareness, awareness of the team. What is it we're trying to achieve? Do we understand the benefits? What's in it for me?
mm,
Essentially, individuals operate at that level often. How does it contribute to the wider organization?
mhm,
How does it contribute, to the values that we embrace? So it starts with that awareness piece. Without data, we're in guesswork
mm,
land. We may as well be blindfold. So we need to support people in the way that is meaningful to them. Like, how am I going to do that as a manager and as a business across the entire organization? How are you going to do that? So we need to surface that. We need data. And then I think it's important to have a mechanism to say, okay, how do we shift from the awareness piece, the understanding of what the data is perhaps suggesting, and help people in ways that are meaningful to them so that
mm,
we move from the insight into an action so that we do something different? Is it that we need to bring more clarity, more direction? Is it that we need to pause and
mm.
give chance for change to embed? Is it that we just need more clarity around the benefit individually for you as an individual? Is it that the acknowledgement that we're going to embrace change at different speeds?
Yeah, it's fascinating because we often use an approach we refer to as the decisional balance, which kind of draws on the fact that we're all familiar with things like carrot and stick, towards and away from motivation, that we can be motivated towards something because it's good, or away from something which is bad. And I mean, I know it's a simplistic model of motivation, and motivation is far more complex than that. And I'm talking about towards and away from, it could be intrinsic or extrinsic stimuli. But the point I was going to make was the point you've really just raised, which is we have to flex for different people. Some people, it will be, if I embrace change, I really need to know what the benefits are, and that's the thing that motivates me. Whereas other people, they need to say, well, I need to be really clear. If I don't do this, what's the cost to me? What's the downside for? What do I miss out on? And for some people, although they are the same thing, the way they're positioned means that people respond differently. And as a manager, I think it's really important to understand what type of person you're dealing with. Equally, it's worth remembering when people engage with change. So when change is put up there, this is what we need you to do. I'll either do it or I won't, in simple terms. If I do, there are benefits and consequences to embracing change. The consequences are probably, it's going to take effort. It's going to be uncomfortable. People are going to be asking me, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? There's lots of reasons why people resist change, and it's the negatives of embracing it. Going to the gym, going on a diet. Well, I'll be hungry. I'll be sore. It takes time. I haven't got that time. They're all negatives, even though there are benefits of going, which is I'll be fitter, I'll be healthier, I'll be leaner, I'd lose weight, whatever people want to say. It's knowing that embracing change has a downside and an upside. But equally, and things we often miss, is if we don't embrace change and we don't embrace those benefits, there are definitely consequences of not changing, as well as benefits. The benefits of not changing are often like a secondary benefit, which is to say, well, if I don't go to the gym, I can sit at home and I can watch telly. I don't have to go on a diet, I can eat the food I want. Yes, they're a benefit in the short term in terms that they're pleasurable, but in the long term, they cost me. And it's knowing that people can look at the same thing from multiple perspectives. And when we're managing teams, it's really important that we understand the mix in someone's head about what's motivating them, what's demotivating them, how do I support them, how do I help them? Because just knowing something's good for you, just knowing there's a benefit, doesn't mean we do it. Common sense and common practice aren't the same thing. And I think what you said is really true. You have to have managerial and supportive flexibility to help people.
Yeah, and we have to give managers tools. We can't, my job as a manager is to manage and
Mm,
do the day job, and even psychologists wouldn't necessarily know what to do with this. So it really is, we need to equip managers with the right tools so that it's practical, so that we can look at we can look at our team and we can start to see how people might need different support. So we can
mm,
provide that kind of right right fit support with those that are struggling more, and this whole concept of fatigue, so that we understand it, we don't misinterpret that, and for us to reflect as well as a business, as an organization, are we giving new initiatives chance to embed?
mhm.
Are we asking too much in a time frame? So I think there's a lot to kind of juggling in the mix here, but I think it's, we need to equip people with the right tools.
Yeah, and again, there's you'll often see within an organization during change processes of any description, some parts of the business there's a rapid uptake and it's really done well, and other places not. And the concept of bright spots, look for where it's working well. Look, what are they doing? What are they doing differently in these bright spots where change is happening and it's being embraced really positively? Are the managers doing things differently? Do we learn from them? Because what we'll often do is if it's going well for us, we just crack on. If it's not going well, we don't tend to look out and say, well, it's going really well for you. What are you doing differently? But learning from each other and finding out those little fires and fan the flames rather than stamp them out. Really encourage people to look around and see where it's working well. If you've got a team of 6 or 7 people, is one person embracing change more than the other? If so, what do they do differently? Distilling down the magic ingredients are so important.
And I love that. And I think that, we perhaps don't do that enough in organizations. But also, we know when we've got the disruptor in the team, the very negative influence. So being able to kind of support, challenge. And I do think the one thing is that one size does not fit all. And, how are we going to deal with it? And I think that's something that where metrics, mechanisms, having data
Mhm.
really removes the guesswork for us.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's really interesting. We don't make the most of our bright spots, in my experience. In fact, when you speak to organizations or speak to teams about how's the initiative going, if there's a change or an objective that's being, striven for, then mostly people say, oh, it's not working well here, or this isn't working as well as it needs to. And they'll focus on what isn't working rather than what is working. And of course, if all you focus on is what's not working, it doesn't appear to be a very successful initiative. If you start picking out the bits that are good and building on those and learning from those, then that can spread like wildfire through the areas where it hasn't yet caught on properly. So I think there's a definite thing there. But the other one you mentioned is, when you've got a difficult person or a good person, and I always talk about the behavioral insights. So, the nudge theories, which is, have you constructed and built an environment that actually supports the change? Or are you saying, I tell you what, you're currently doing this in this environment. We want you to do this in the same environment. So, in other words, the environment that is currently promoting what we don't want is the environment in which we want you to operate in a new way. And if you said to someone, we'd want you to stop drinking alcohol and we don't want you to eat junk food, the worst thing to do would be to fill your house with alcohol and junk food, because it would mean you're having to use willpower. And we know willpower has a very finite lifespan, that you want to be supporting the change. And so I think one of the things, again, going back to Engage, that I love is the accelerator program, which takes you through the 12 steps. So in other words, it will identify these are things you need to work on to embrace change. but at the same time, not just do that, but then have 12 touch points on into the future to hold your hand and take you through that. And I think that's about creating an environment in which the change is being supported rather than this is what you wanted to do, often do it, good luck, which is a recipe for best hit and miss.
Yeah, and I think that's the personalization engine that comes with it. So then we're not just taking one approach and applying it to everybody equally. As you note there, in that accelerator 12-step program, you as an individual get something that's very relevant to you and the challenges that you're facing,
Mm,
whether that's, feeling that sense of fear or just that sheer exhaustion or that lack of clarity that you get it to build confidence or to help you feel more energized about what lies ahead. But I think you're right. I think it's that really important bit that is very much part of my core work. How do we support people, A, differently, because we all need different things, but how do we do something that actually changes it moves the dial, it moves the needle. We actually walk away and do something differently because what's the point otherwise? We want people to feel empowered, energized, um, like want to enjoy their job.
mm,
And so I think that 12-step program, and what's great about that program is very doable. 15 minutes in your week, maybe. You could
yeah.
spend longer, but it's not time consuming. It's in the flow of work. So we're not adding to the burden, but we're just giving tools and kind of programs that really they layer into what you're already doing. Like we were approached recently by a big construction company, and that was their challenge. And what was great from the conversation, it wasn't all negative. It was, we're doing some great things.
Mm,
We're doing some great work. And it was so nice to hear that she was recognizing that. But she really didn't know what to do with the kind of the group, the percentage who were struggling with it, who were really fatigued by the process. So that was her language, this change fatigue, and how might we support her to kind of do a more tailored approach. So yeah, a lot to think about there, Simon.
yeah, there really is. And I think, if we sort of trying to wrap up now, it's this whole idea that the only constant is change. It's a reality. Glib though the statement is, it's so true. At no point will an organization ever say to anyone, "Oh, you've had a great year or you've had a great month. Take a chill, ease off this month, take it easy." Just never happens. At the end of every year, all I ever hear any client that we've ever worked with say is, "Fantastic, thanks ever so much. What we need next year is a little bit more with a little bit less and a little bit quicker." And so we know that's the nature of the world we work in. I don't know any. I've never worked in the 25 years I've been doing this. Never come across a company that said, "You've done so well, just ease off and recharge." So if we don't support people psychologically to deal with change, we just keep foisting change on and on and on. There's only one thing that will happen, and that's burnout. And it's not about not encouraging people to change, but it's about encouraging them to change while supporting the psychological process that underpin it. And if you
Yeah.
don't, to me, it's like running a car and saying, "Well, I'm running the car brilliantly. I've got a taxi and I never have it serviced. I'm never off the road." Well, that's great until it breaks down. And when it breaks down, it'll be catastrophic because you didn't service it. For me, it's what are you doing to service the psychological processes that enable you to keep that focus on the never-ending change, which is the reality of the world in which we live.
Yeah, I love that summary, Simon. And I think that's a great note to finish on. I think it is. How do we support people psychologically, so that we stay healthy, that we keep, our organization fit for the
Mm.
future.
And look
So
after our people at the same time.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, look, Jodie, lovely as ever. Really enjoyed that. Looking forward to our next one. In the meantime, take care.
Great. Take care. Bye.
Bye.